I am an entrepreneur, author, speaker, artist, model, survivor, and lived experience expert. Over the past 20 years, I have worked hard to build my career in various fields. I have worked in the events industry, and more recently, I have run a one-of-a-kind lifestyle management company that has placed me as a subject matter expert and afforded me opportunities like being on television and winning awards. Now that is all one pretty picture, the highlight reel of my life and my accomplishments illuminated in neon lights. When people introduce me, I'm often described as successful, accomplished, and inspirational. Though what many people don't know, as they are looking at the neon lights, is I am also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, incest, family violence, and trauma. I have shared the darker parts of my story over the past few years and opened up by writing and self-publishing my memoir. Since disclosing publicly and sharing my story, it has become very clear to me that as a society, we have a problem with accepting that trauma survivors are right in front of us. In the same way that we have a problem with accepting that perpetrators are right in front of us. Over the past few years, I've had people tell me very directly that they would rather I not speak of my trauma. They only want to focus on the shiny highlights, and they struggle to sit with my lived experience. Strangers struggle to believe my story as I shatter their internal biases of what a trauma survivor looks and acts like. They say things like, "You're so successful. You seem so happy. It can't have been that bad," as they attempt to fit my story back into a palatable box. So, who do we picture when we think of trauma survivors, and are our unconscious biases clouding our judgment and impacting the support we provide to survivors of trauma within our healthcare systems and greater society? I believe that I learned about this unconscious biases and the expectation within society for me to be palatable at the same time as when the abuse commenced for me. Most of us have heard of the hyperarousal or trauma responses commonly known as fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. When I was 10, my father started to sexually abuse me. My responses moved between freeze and fawn. During the abuse itself, I would freeze. I was mute, and my body barely moved as I disassociated. But during the day, or in moments when other people were in our presence, I would fawn, being the perfect daughter in fear of not only my father, but the fear of standing out and drawing attention to the abuse that was occurring. It was this fawning behaviour that would mean that the abuse I was subjected to would go on for 4 years, in the same house as my mother, brother, and sister. Not at any stage were any of them aware of what was going on. I had a deep sense of shame, which meant that I didn't want anyone in my family or the community to know. During the abuse, friends, teachers, and other adults in my life also did not know of the abuse. And I don't recall ever considering disclosing to them. This was a coping mechanism that would go on to become my armour. What's interesting is even when the abuse stopped, my fawn-like behaviour did not. I continued to play the role of the good girl, and that became a blueprint for my trauma response behaviour. When things became difficult in my life, I would add more to my plate. I would seek out more opportunities to succeed and would build skills to show myself, and more importantly, society, that I was high functioning. Everything was okay. The trauma had not broken me, and I refused to be seen as a victim. I made a subconscious decision that being a workaholic and always being busy to the detriment of my mental health and physical well-being meant that I could hide in plain sight. Excessive use of drugs, alcohol, or poor behaviour were not socially acceptable, but working excessive hours, people-pleasing, and putting others above my self-care were socially acceptable ways to deal with my trauma and were often traits that were praised. I continued to fawn. Today, Even with the accessibility of the internet and social media and the capacity we have to broaden our views and perceptions, most of us still believe that trauma survivors are meant to look and act broken. In some ways, the internet, fed by data provided by humans, is adding to this problem. When searching for images online with the keywords trauma survivor or abuse survivor, the images are grim. The positive sides of survival are ignored, and the majority of the images produced showed injured, sad, damaged, and broken-looking humans. Now, I'm not implying that the impact of trauma is not significant and that I have not felt injured, sad, damaged, and broken at times, but due to my fawn-like behaviour, I am often dismissed. I have been turned away by health professionals, and I have been deemed to be too high-functioning. And I have found that I am requested to sensationalise my story and expected to share the intricate trauma-filled details for people to acknowledge my lived experience. The system, or more importantly, society, continues to fail us. This system keeps our truth in the shadows and asks us to be fine, to get over it, or if that's not possible, to at least act like we're fine and over it. As a high-functioning trauma survivor, my fawning has come at a significant cost. It has kept the truth in the shadows for years, as I kept my childhood abuse and trauma a secret for close to 3 decades. It has meant that my behaviour of putting the comfort of others above my own comfort and safety has led me to end up in additional abusive relationships and life-threatening situations since my childhood abuse. And it has meant that I have continued to feed into the lie that our rose-coloured glasses have told us for far too long. The lie that you or I or the person sitting next to you surely couldn't be a trauma survivor, because aren't we all fine? I believe to truly unpack the face of trauma, we must begin to dismantle the rose-coloured glasses we expect survivors to hide behind. We must continue to amplify the stories of all survivors who are willing and have the safety to share. We must walk beside them as their allies at their pace, as they discover ways to share their lived experience and use public platforms and the power of the internet to start highlighting the whole truth of who trauma survivors are. We know that abuse, violence, and trauma do not discriminate. And if we continue to expect survivors to hide in plain sight, we continue to create a world that enables perpetrators to do harm. We must not discriminate when we choose who we lend our support to, especially as we explore holistic models of healthcare. We must look past the practiced fawn-like behaviour and provide survivors with a safe space to disable their trauma and stress responses so that we, the survivors, can bring our stories to the foreground by sharing our lived experiences so that we can continue to heal and make long-lasting change. Thank you.
Questions? Yeah, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Caroline? Thank you so much. Maybe across the afternoon, might have some more questions for you.
So much easier.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, you've got a
There is
question?
I thought I got out scot-free. For anyone that didn't hear that question, it was how does it play out today in my life, and do I catch myself in those moments? It plays out in lots of different ways. There is some stuff going on at that cellular level where I have chronic fatigue and a range of other chronic diseases that I'm really conscious of. Now that's after years of medical diagnosis and trying to fix it at the medical level without looking at it from the trauma level. But I think one of the things that was really healing for me was writing when I wrote my memoir, and then going on to research and understand that. I very much practice what I preach, so I make a point to rest. I try and catch myself in that people-pleasing hyper fixation. Now, when I read out all the things I do, I still do a lot. But I do what I enjoy, so I have a lot of boundaries in place, and I'm very good at saying no to the things that I know just are going to burn me out. And I do have some really great people in that safe space. I call it my island, and there's a very small amount of people that live there with me. And they kind of have the right to veto things when I am people-pleasing and saying yes to too many things. So having some people that are walking beside me and very much being conscious of when I am saying yes and maybe I shouldn't be. But thank you for the question. Oh, yes, that's what our bodies do. Everyone's been on a holiday and then gotten a flu the day 2 of your holiday. That's just your body telling you. Yeah, very much so. I've had a lot of burnouts in different roles. Working in the events industry and doing ridiculous hours was definitely one of them. Yes. Very much so. So that I'll just do it myself. I won't ask for help. I'll just do it myself. And you're doing it wrong anyway, so I'll just do it myself. I've burnt out to the point where my chronic fatigue has had me bedridden for months, and I've got children, so that isn't necessarily something that works for me in my life. So, those moments haven't been pretty. And then from a mental health perspective, depression, being on medication, a range of other things. So it all compounds eventually. But I think it's very common. And I think the word burnout, especially in the workforce and the corporate space, is something we look at as a symptom when we're not looking at why we're burning out. Anyone else? No? Thank you.